When I moved into Cedar Ridge Estates, I thought I was finally leaving chaos behind. After 20 years in law enforcement, 10 of them spent working undercover, I wanted nothing more than a quiet neighborhood, a modest home, and the comforting sound of my own engine roaring on a Sunday morning. My 1969 Mustang Fastback wasn't just a car, it was my legacy. My father had bought it fresh off the lot, worked on it with me through my teenage years, and before he passed, he handed me the keys like a sacred trust. I rebuilt that car from the frame up, polished chrome, deep navy paint that shimmered in sunlight, leather seats stitched by hand. Every inch of it told a story, a memory of blood, sweat, and family. I wasn't rich, but I had pride, and that Mustang was the one indulgence I refused to let the world take from me. When I found the house, a neat, two-story with a wraparound porch and just enough yard for my German Shepherd, Duke, it felt like peace. Cedar Ridge had that small-town charm people write postcards about. Kids on bicycles, retirees gardening in neat rows, couples walking hand in hand at dusk. I'd been through enough in my career, gang busts, drug raids, undercover stings gone wrong, that the stillness almost felt alien. But I needed it. My therapist had told me after my last assignment that I was burned out, that I needed time away from the flashing lights, the sirens, and the constant tension that came with being chief of police. So, I took his advice, I bought a house, kept my badge quiet, and decided to live like a regular guy for once. The first few weeks were calm. I fixed up the porch swing, changed the oil on the Mustang, and introduced myself to a few neighbors. Everyone seemed friendly enough, at first. The couple across the street, Mike and Jennifer, invited me over for barbecue. The kids from down the road loved watching me work on the car, fascinated by its deep rumble. But every paradise has its serpent, and in Cedar Ridge, that serpent went by the name of Karen Whitmore, the self-appointed queen of the Homeowners Association. She was the type of woman you could hear before you saw, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, her perfume so strong it lingered long after she'd stormed off. Platinum blonde, always in some pastel cardigan and oversized sunglasses, she strutted through the neighborhood like a general inspecting her troops. I met her on my second week. I was outside washing the Mustang, Duke lounging beside me, when I heard the unmistakable click of high heels on concrete. "Excuse me," she said, arms folded, eyes hidden behind her shades. "You must be the new resident at 214. I nodded, wiping my hands on a rag. "That's me. Name's Mark." "Karen Whitmore," she said, extending her hand like she expected me to kiss it. "President of the Cedar Ridge HOA. I like to welcome all new homeowners personally." I shook her hand, but her grip was more inspection than greeting. Her eyes darted to the Mustang, and I could practically see the disapproval form on her lips. "Lovely car," she said, in a tone that made "lovely" sound like an accusation. "But, you know, we do have certain guidelines here regarding vehicles. We prefer all cars be stored in the garage when not in use." "It's a classic," I replied evenly. "I take it out on weekends. It's not an eyesore." "Well," she sniffed, glancing over the hood. "Beauty is subjective. But I do hope you're aware of our HOA policies. I'll drop off a copy of the bylaws later this week." "Appreciate that," I said, forcing a smile. That was my first warning sign. Karen wasn't satisfied with order, she needed control. Over the next few weeks, she sent friendly reminders about the color of my mailbox, the height of my grass, even the placement of my trash cans. I ignored most of them. After years of commanding a police department, I wasn't about to let a suburban busybody dictate where I parked my car. But the tension simmered beneath the surface. I could see the disapproval in her eyes every time she passed my driveway, and I knew, deep down, that this wasn't over. Her son, Kyle, entered the picture a few weeks later. A lanky 19-year-old with an inflated ego and the kind of arrogance that only comes from being told you're special your whole life. He'd roll through the neighborhood blasting bass-heavy music in his lifted truck, acting like he owned the place. One afternoon, while I was polishing the Mustang, he pulled up beside me, window down, sunglasses perched low. "Nice ride, old man," he said, smirking. "Didn't think they let antiques on the road anymore." I gave him a polite nod. "Runs better than most cars half its age." He circled it slowly, eyes tracing every curve of the body. "You ever think about selling it?" "No," I said simply. "Everything's got a price. Not this." He laughed, revving his engine before speeding off, spraying gravel in his wake. Duke barked, and I just sighed. I'd dealt with punks like him my whole career. But the thing that worried me wasn't Kyle, it was his mother. Because if he ever caused trouble, Karen would be there to clean it up, no matter the cost. A few nights later, around 11 p.m., I heard something outside, metal scraping, the sound of a latch. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped onto the porch. The moonlight caught a silhouette by my garage door. I flicked the beam forward, and there he was, Kyle, trying to open the garage. "Hey!" I barked. He froze. "Oh, I was just..." "Step away from the door," I ordered, my voice instinctively taking that old commanding tone. He did, hands raised, a nervous chuckle escaping him. "Man, relax. I was just looking. Didn't mean nothing." "Looking doesn't involve a crowbar," I said, nodding toward the tool lying by his feet. He glanced down, then bolted. I let him go. I didn't want to escalate, not yet. But I had the footage. My cameras caught everything. The next morning, before I could even report it to the HOA or file a quiet complaint, Karen showed up at my door, red-faced and furious. "How dare you accuse my son of trespassing," she yelled the second I opened the door. "Kyle told me everything. He said you threatened him with a weapon." I took a slow breath. "He was trying to break into my garage, Karen. I have video." "You're mistaken," she said quickly. "Kyle would never do that. He was just curious about your car. And if you think you can intimidate my family, you're mistaken." I folded my arms. "I don't intimidate. I enforce the law." Her eyes flickered, uncertain. "Enforce? Are you, in law enforcement?" "Retired," I lied smoothly. "Now if you'll excuse me, I've got things to do." She left in a huff, muttering something about uncooperative neighbors. I thought that would be the end of it, but with people like Karen, nothing ever ends quietly. 3 days later, I was out mowing my lawn when I saw 2 squad cars pull into the cul-de-sac. My stomach dropped, not out of fear, but disbelief. They parked right in front of my house, lights flashing, and out stepped 2 of my former officers. I recognized them immediately, rookies I'd trained back when I ran the department downtown. Their faces went pale when they saw me. "Chief," one of them said, blinking. "Officers," I greeted, cutting the engine on my mower. "What's going on?" We got a call about an assault," the younger one stammered. "Resident claims you threatened a young man with a firearm." "Of course. Karen." I leaned against the mower, arms crossed. "Did she give you any evidence?" "She said her son was traumatized, that you brandished a weapon and verbally threatened him." I let out a slow, humorless laugh. "Did she mention the part where he tried to break into my garage with a crowbar?" They exchanged glances. "No, sir." "Then maybe you should start by reviewing the footage on my front camera before you waste department time." They followed me inside, watched the video, and within minutes, their postures changed completely. They saw Kyle's face, the crowbar, the whole thing. "Sir," the taller one said quietly, "should we write this up or..." "No," I interrupted. "Leave it. I'll handle it my way." When they left, I knew the game had changed. Karen had escalated this from neighborhood politics to open warfare. But what she didn't know, what made the situation almost amusing, was that the very police she tried to use against me answered to me. I was still technically on leave, not retired. My name still sat at the top of the organizational chart. My signature was still on half the policies she was trying to weaponize. That night, I sat on the porch, Duke resting at my feet, the Mustang gleaming under the porch light. I'd spent a career dealing with criminals, liars, and manipulators. But this was something new, a war fought with petty grievances, rumors, and paperwork instead of bullets. Karen thought she could bully me into submission. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I took a slow sip of coffee, watching her house across the street. I could see her curtains twitch. She was watching me too. "All right, Karen," I muttered to myself. "You called the cops on the wrong man." The battle lines were drawn. The next few weeks turned Cedar Ridge from a quiet neighborhood into a slow-burning battlefield. Karen didn't confront me directly after the police incident, but her silence was louder than her shouting had ever been. Every time I stepped outside, I could feel the eyes from her window following me. The tension in the air had texture. It wasn't just a feeling, it was something you could almost reach out and touch. My gut told me she wasn't done, and I've learned to trust my gut. Years in law enforcement taught me that when someone like Karen loses control, they don't give up, they regroup and come back with reinforcements. Her reinforcements came in the form of the HOA board. It started subtly. A letter in my mailbox citing violations of community standards. My grass was allegedly an inch too high, the color of my mailbox didn't conform to the approved shade, my porch light was too bright. Then came the fines, $50 here, $75 there, each one printed with the same smug letterhead bearing the HOA seal. I knew exactly where it was coming from. Karen might not have been able to scare me with police, but she figured she could drown me in paperwork and penalties instead. I ignored the first few letters. Then I started documenting everything. Every envelope, every email, every text from the HOA's generic number went into a binder. You learn that kind of discipline as a cop: never react, always record. If you want to win a war without firing a shot, you build a case. It didn't take long before the gossip started. People I'd chatted with just weeks before began avoiding me. Neighbors who once waved when I drove by suddenly turned their heads. At first, I couldn't figure out why, until one afternoon, Mike, the guy across the street, came over looking uneasy. "Hey, man," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "I thought you should know what's going around." I set down my wrench. "What's that?" "Karen's telling people you pulled a gun on her son," he said. "She's saying the cops didn't arrest you because you've got connections downtown." I sighed. Connections? That's one way to put it. She's painting you like some kind of dangerous ex-cop with anger issues. People are starting to believe it. That didn't surprise me. Karen had a way of spinning stories until the truth was buried under layers of fear and exaggeration. And Kyle, well, he was all too happy to play the victim. I'd see him drive by, slowing down just enough to glare, his phone out like he was recording me. The irony was almost funny. He was the criminal, but somehow I'd become the villain. I knew I couldn't fight gossip with anger. I had to be smarter. I spent my evenings in the garage, working on the Mustang, letting my mind piece together a strategy. My badge, my authority, even my reputation, I'd earned all of it through patience and precision. I wasn't about to lose it because some suburban tyrant thought she could rewrite the truth. I wasn't going to expose myself as police chief yet, not until I had something that couldn't be twisted. One Saturday morning, I got my chance. I was under the Mustang, tightening the rear sway bar, when I heard voices outside, Karen's unmistakable tone, sharp as ever, and Kyle's deeper one, half whispering. I wiped my hands and quietly peeked out the side of the garage. There they were, standing by my driveway, both looking toward my car. Kyle was pointing at it. "Mom, I told you," he said. "That car's worth at least 60 grand. Guy doesn't deserve to have it sitting here collecting dust." Karen crossed her arms. "And how do you propose we fix that?" "I've got a guy," he said. "Knows how to move classics. Easy cash. He won't even trace it." "Absolutely not," she hissed. "I will not have you stealing from a neighbor." Kyle laughed. "You didn't mind when I was checking it out before." "That was different," she snapped. "Now the whole neighborhood's watching him. He's dangerous." I stepped out before she could say more. "Morning, Karen," I said, voice calm, steady. She flinched, trying to recover with a forced smile. "Oh, Mark. Didn't see you there. We were just talking about cars." "Sounded like business," I said, eyes locking on Kyle. "Something I should know about?" Kyle sneered. "Nah, old man, just admiring your toy." "Then admire it from the sidewalk," I said evenly. "You step onto my property again, we'll have a different conversation." Karen's lips tightened. "You're being unnecessarily hostile." "Hostile?" I repeated. "No. I'm being clear." She turned, pulling her son by the arm, muttering about unstable neighbors. That night, I moved the Mustang into the garage and installed new security cameras, infrared, motion activated, full coverage. I wasn't taking chances. Something told me Kyle's obsession with my car wasn't going away anytime soon. And I was right. A week later, I woke to the sound of screeching tires. By the time I ran outside, my heart sank. Someone had keyed the Mustang. Deep gouges along the passenger side, a jagged line carved straight through the paint. It was deliberate, malicious. The kind of act that came from pure spite. Duke barked and circled the driveway, nose twitching. I checked the footage, and there it was, Kyle, hoodie up, baseball cap low, dragging a key down the length of my car before sprinting off. I burned with anger, but not the kind that makes you lash out. It was the quiet kind, the focused kind. The kind that builds into a plan. The next morning, I called in a favor. Detective Owens, one of my oldest friends on the force, met me at the local diner. "Jesus, Mark," he said when I showed him the footage. "You sure you want to handle this through the system? You know how this'll play out. She'll lawyer up, claim it's a misunderstanding." "That's why I'm not pressing charges yet," I said. "Not until I've got more." "More?" I smiled. "Oh, I'm just getting started." That week, I filed every HOA letter, every false complaint, and every video clip into a report. I even requested a copy of the HOA's meeting minutes under state law, public documents, even for private associations. When I got them, I found something interesting. Karen had been using HOA funds for beautification projects that didn't exist. Thousands of dollars in expenses paid to contractors that had no business listings. Fraud, plain and simple. Now I had her. I spent the next several days preparing. Meanwhile, Karen doubled down. The HOA board sent a letter stating I was in violation of multiple property standards and would face a lien if I didn't comply. I laughed when I read it. A lien? Against a cop's house? She really thought she was untouchable. But her downfall came faster than even I expected. It was the night of the HOA's monthly meeting, held at the community center, a beige brick building that smelled of old coffee and cheap carpet cleaner. I showed up uninvited, dressed casual, carrying a folder under my arm. The board members sat in a semicircle at the front, Karen in the middle like a queen on her throne. When I entered, the room fell silent. Mr. Adams, she said curtly. This is a closed meeting. I live here, I replied, taking a seat. And I have business with the board. You can submit concerns in writing. I dropped the folder on the table. I already did. You ignored them. So now we're doing it in person. Her eyes flickered, but she kept her composure. Fine. You have 5 minutes. Won't need that long, I said. I opened the folder and slid copies of documents toward each member. These are HOA expense reports from the last 6 months. Notice anything strange? They skimmed the pages, frowning. What's silver line contracting? One of them asked. That's the question, I said. There's no record of them in the state database. No license. No address. Yet they've been paid over $12,000 in HOA funds. And guess whose name is on the checks? The room went quiet. Karen's face lost color. That's absurd, she said. You have no right to access those records. Actually, under state law, any member of a homeowners association has the right to inspect financial documents. I'm not just within my rights, I'm within my duty. She stammered, searching for words. The board members exchanged uneasy looks. I could see it in their faces, the doubt, the betrayal. Karen had built her power on fear, and now that foundation was crumbling. But before she could recover, the front door opened, and in walked Detective Owens. He gave me a nod. Evening, he said, flashing his badge. We received a report about possible financial misconduct. Just need to ask a few questions. Karen's voice broke. This is outrageous. Who called the police? I smiled faintly. Funny how that works, isn't it? Owens and his partner began asking questions, taking notes. The room buzzed with whispers. Karen tried to protest, but the evidence spoke for itself. I didn't need to gloat. I'd seen this scene play out too many times before, people who thought they were untouchable suddenly realizing they'd built their empire on sand. As the officers escorted her out for questioning, she turned to glare at me. You think you've won? You're not who you say you are. I met her eyes. You're right, I said quietly. You have no idea who I am. I'd spent a career watching people react when the walls started closing in, and Karen's reaction was textbook, rage, denial, and vengeance. After that HOA meeting, Cedar Ridge wasn't quiet anymore. The whole neighborhood buzzed with rumors, whispers about the HOA queen being under investigation. For most people, embarrassment is enough to make them lie low. But Karen wasn't most people. She was the kind who'd burn the whole neighborhood down just to feel the warmth of the fire she started. For a week or two, I enjoyed an uneasy calm. No more fines, no letters, no complaints about my porch light or mailbox. I almost let myself believe it was over. But then the vandalism started again, subtler this time. My mailbox got knocked over in the middle of the night. Dog feces appeared neatly bagged and left on my porch. Duke's fence gate was mysteriously open twice, though thankfully he was trained never to leave the yard. I knew it wasn't random kids. This was personal, and I didn't need to be Sherlock Holmes to know where it was coming from. Karen might have been under scrutiny, but her son wasn't, and Kyle was furious. His mother's humiliation was apparently my fault, and in his mind, revenge was justified. One night, around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of an engine revving outside. When I pulled back the curtain, I saw Kyle's truck idling at the curb, headlights cutting across my lawn. I could make out his silhouette in the driver's seat, phone glowing in his hand as he recorded a video. Then he peeled off down the street, tires screeching loud enough to wake the whole block. It wasn't a threat, it was a challenge. I'd dealt with punks like him my entire career. But back then, I had a badge on my chest and a department behind me. Now I was a man on leave, and if I overstepped, I'd become the story. So I did what I'd always done best: gather evidence, stay quiet, and wait. 2 days later, things escalated from nuisance to danger. I came home from a late-night run and noticed the faint smell of gasoline near the driveway. My instincts kicked in instantly. I swept my flashlight across the ground, and my blood went cold. There was a thin line of gas leading from the edge of the street toward my garage door. It hadn't been lit, but it was clear what someone had intended. I called the department. Within 20 minutes, Detective Owens and a fire investigator were on scene. Owens whistled low. "That's not vandalism, Mark. That's attempted arson." "I know," I said grimly. "And I know exactly who's behind it." "You want me to bring him in?" "Not yet," I said. "Not until we have something solid tying him to it. I want him to walk himself into a corner." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the garage beside my Mustang, Duke curled at my feet, the lights dimmed low. I wasn't scared, anger had burned the fear right out of me. But there's a particular kind of fury that comes when someone threatens not just your property, but your peace. That car wasn't just metal and chrome, it was everything my father taught me about hard work, loyalty, and pride. To see it targeted like that felt personal in a way that words couldn't describe. By the next morning, I had a plan. Step 1 was exposure. Karen had built her power on image, on manipulation. She couldn't stand being seen as the villain. So I printed the arson photos and placed them, neatly, in every HOA member's mailbox. No note, no accusations, just the evidence. Word spread like wildfire. Within hours, half the neighborhood knew someone had tried to burn down my garage. Karen came storming over that afternoon, face red and eyes blazing. "How dare you spread lies about my family," she yelled. "Lies?" I said evenly, folding my arms. "You think I poured gasoline on my own driveway? You're trying to ruin me," she shrieked. "First the finances, now this. You're obsessed." "Karen," I said quietly, "I'm trying to live in peace. But if you or your son cross another line, I'll make sure neither of you can step foot in this neighborhood again." Her lips trembled, and for a split second, I saw something almost like fear. But it wasn't enough. People like her only understand one thing: consequence. That evening, I took Duke for a walk around the block. As we passed Kyle's truck, parked half on the curb, I noticed something under the front bumper: gasoline stains. I smiled to myself. He'd been sloppy. The next day, I met Owens again at the station. I brought the footage, the stains, and the timeline. "It's enough to bring him in for questioning," Owens said. "You sure you want to go that far?" "Oh, I want to go further," I said. "But first, I want to see how his mother reacts when her son's in cuffs." Owens chuckled. "You always did have a flair for drama, Chief. Don't remind me." That evening, around sunset, 2 unmarked cars rolled into Cedar Ridge. I watched from my porch as Owens and his partner knocked on Karen's door. She answered, wearing her usual pastel sweater and pearls, face painted with a practiced smile. It vanished the second they said Kyle's name. Within minutes, they led him out in handcuffs, his eyes darting between me and his mother. Karen screamed, called it harassment, abuse of power, anything she could think of. Neighbors peeked from windows, some recording on their phones. Kyle cursed, struggling as they put him in the back of the cruiser. I didn't say a word. I just watched. When the cars drove off, Karen turned toward me, shaking. "You did this," she hissed. "You're behind everything." I met her gaze calmly. "Actions have consequences, Karen. You'll regret this. You don't know who I am." I smiled faintly. "No, Karen. You don't know who I am. For the first time, she hesitated. Maybe it was the tone of my voice, or maybe she finally saw what she'd been poking at all along, the steel behind my calm. She turned and slammed her door, and I knew that wasn't the end. People like her never back down quietly. Over the next few days, the tension reached its breaking point. The HOA board voted to suspend Karen pending a full audit, and the investigation into her finances deepened. Kyle made bail within 48 hours, and when he came home, he looked different, angrier, darker. I saw it in his eyes the one time our paths crossed at the mailbox. He wasn't just humiliated, he wanted payback. That night, I heard his truck again. Slow, deliberate. I turned off my lights and watched from the window. He parked at the end of my driveway and just sat there. Minutes passed, then the engine revved, and he sped off into the dark. I didn't know what he was planning, but I knew it wasn't over. 2 days later, my suspicion proved right. At 4 a.m., a loud crash jolted me awake. Duke barked furiously, and I rushed to the front door. The Mustang's alarm blared outside. When I stepped onto the porch, my heart dropped. Kyle's truck had rammed straight into my car. The Mustang's front end was crumpled, glass shattered, smoke rising from the hood. Kyle stumbled out of the truck, dazed but conscious, shouting incoherently. I ran toward him. Kyle! What the hell have you done? He swung at me, wild and clumsy. I dodged easily and pinned him against the side of the truck. You could have killed someone. I yelled. Should have been you, he spat. That was it. The last straw. Sirens wailed in the distance. Owens had been on patrol nearby and got my emergency ping instantly. When the cruisers arrived, the officers pulled Kyle away and cuffed him again. Karen showed up minutes later, still in her robe, screaming as they loaded him into the back seat. You can't do this. He's just a boy. He's a criminal, I said quietly. Owens looked at me. You want to press full charges this time? I nodded. Everything. Property damage, reckless endangerment, assault. Karen lunged toward me, tears streaming down her face. You're destroying my family. I held her gaze. No, Karen. You destroyed it yourself. The neighborhood was silent except for the hum of police radios. I stood there watching the flashing lights reflect off the twisted metal of my father's car, a lifetime of memories crushed by arrogance and spite. For the first time in years, I felt the full weight of my badge, even if it wasn't on my chest. I'd spent years protecting people from the worst of the world. Now I was standing in front of it, face to face, in my own driveway. Owens approached, lowering his voice. You know, you could make all this go away if you wanted. Pull rank, call in a favor. I shook my head. No. If I did that, I'd be no better than her. He nodded. Then I guess it's time they found out who they've been messing with. Not yet, I said. Let the truth come out on its own. When they towed the Mustang away for repairs, I stood on the curb, Duke beside me, the early morning light washing over the chaos. The quiet peace I'd wanted when I moved here was gone. But something deeper had taken its place, a purpose. Because this wasn't just about a car anymore. This was about showing a bully, and everyone like her, that justice still had a place, even in the suburbs. The morning after the rash, Cedar Ridge didn't just wake up, it erupted. Word spread faster than a police bulletin. Everyone had heard the sirens, seen the flashing lights, and now they all wanted to know what had happened between the new guy and the HOA president's son. By sunrise, neighbors were out on their lawns, pretending to water flowers or walk dogs, but really, they were talking. Watching. I spent most of that morning giving statements to the insurance adjuster and the responding officers. Owens made sure everything was by the book, no favors, no shortcuts. My Mustang was wrecked, but I wasn't broken. If anything, I felt sharper. Focused. Because for the first time, everyone could see what kind of people Karen and her son really were. But Karen didn't give up easily. She spent that week trying to twist the story again. I'd overhear bits of conversation when I walked Duke, whispers about me provoking her boy, or being a crazy ex-cop with a temper. She held her head high in public, pretending she still had authority, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. The investigation into her misuse of HOA funds was still ongoing, and with her son in legal trouble, the facade of control she'd built was cracking. Then came the board meeting that changed everything. This time, the HOA gathered not at the community center, but at the town hall, bigger space, more people, and a local reporter who'd gotten wind of the story. I hadn't planned to go, but Owens called that afternoon. "You might want to be there," he said. "Things are about to get interesting." When I arrived, the parking lot was full. Neighbors, council members, even a few off-duty officers I recognized stood outside in clusters, murmuring. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Karen sat near the front, pale but composed, flanked by two lawyers. The rest of the board avoided looking at her. As I took a seat near the back, whispers rippled through the room. People knew who I was now, not just the quiet guy with the dog and the Mustang, but the man at the center of the neighborhood's biggest scandal. The meeting began with formalities, then one of the board members stood. "Before we proceed with any new business," she said, "we need to address the ongoing financial discrepancies discovered in our recent audit." Karen's lawyer immediately stood. "My client has cooperated fully with the investigation. These so-called discrepancies are misunderstandings. The funds in question were used for legitimate community improvements." The woman frowned. "Then why were they paid to companies that don't exist?" Murmurs filled the room. The lawyer hesitated. Karen whispered something urgently to him, but before he could respond, the doors at the back opened, and Owens walked in, holding a folder. He wasn't alone. Behind him were two uniformed officers and a city auditor. "Sorry to interrupt," Owens said, stepping forward. "But we just concluded our review of the HOA's financial records. And I think the residents deserve to hear the findings directly." Karen's face went sheet white. "You can't just barge in here," she snapped. "Actually," Owens said mildly, "we can. This is a public meeting." He handed the folder to the board president, who skimmed it, her hands trembling. Then she looked up. "It appears Mrs. Whitmore authorized payments totaling over $15,000 to entities that were never verified. Funds have also been redirected into a private account under her maiden name." The room exploded with noise, gasps, murmurs, angry voices. Karen shot to her feet. "This is a setup," she screamed. "He did this. He's behind all of it." Owens raised a brow. "Ma'am, we have bank statements, signatures, and digital transfers linking directly to your devices. You might want to stop talking." Her lawyer tried to calm her, but she shoved his hand away. Her eyes found mine at the back of the room, cold, furious, and desperate. "You think you're untouchable, don't you?" she shouted. "You come in here with your fancy car and your fake stories. You're nothing but a thug hiding behind a badge." The room went still. Everyone turned to look at me. Owen's lips twitched, he knew what was coming. I stood slowly, hands in my pockets. "Badge?" I said evenly. "You've got that part right, Karen." I reached into my jacket and pulled out my leather wallet, the one I hadn't shown anyone since moving here. I flipped it open, the golden shield catching the fluorescent light. The room fell completely silent. "My name is Mark Adams," I said clearly. "Chief of Police, Cedar County." For a second, you could hear nothing but the hum of the ceiling fans. Then came the whispers, a wave of disbelief, awe, and, from Karen, horror. You lied, she stammered. You deceived everyone. I moved here for peace, I said. Not for power. You're the one who brought the law into this. You called the cops, remember? Owens hid a smirk behind his clipboard. She did, Chief. Twice, if memory serves. Karen's knees seemed to buckle. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently, but she wasn't listening. Her gaze darted around the room, realizing she'd lost every ally she ever had. The board members looked disgusted, neighbors avoided her eyes, and the reporters scribbled furiously. Mrs. Whitmore, the auditor said calmly, given the evidence presented, you're being formally referred for criminal investigation. You're also hereby removed from the HOA board, effective immediately. Karen let out a strangled sound, half scream, half sob. You can't do this to me. I built this community. Owens motioned to the officers. Ma'am, please stand. As they escorted her out, she twisted around to face me one last time. You'll pay for this, she shouted. You think everyone's on your side now, but they'll turn on you. They always do. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. When the doors closed behind her, the room exhaled collectively. Some people applauded. Others just sat in stunned silence. For the first time since I'd moved there, Cedar Ridge felt peaceful. Honest. After the meeting, people came up to me, shaking my hand, apologizing for believing her lies, thanking me for standing up. I wasn't used to gratitude. In my line of work, it's rare. But hearing those simple thank yous reminded me why I'd joined the force in the first place. Later that night, Owens and I sat on my porch, a couple of beers between us. Duke lay by my feet, finally relaxed. The wrecked Mustang sat covered in the driveway, waiting for restoration. You sure you're not staying retired? Owens asked. I chuckled. I'm starting to think retirement doesn't like me much. Guess not. You ever think about what you'll do next? I took a sip, looking out at the quiet street. I'll rebuild, I said. The car, the house, maybe even this neighborhood. One piece at a time. He nodded. You know, you handled this cleaner than I would've. That's the funny thing about justice, I said. Sometimes the cleanest work happens outside the badge. The crickets hummed in the distance, and for once, Cedar Ridge felt like the peaceful place I'd imagined when I first moved in. But deep down, I knew the story wasn't quite over. People like Karen don't disappear quietly. They lick their wounds, plot their comebacks, and wait for the right moment. Still, I wasn't worried. The truth was out, the balance restored, and this time, the whole neighborhood knew who they were dealing with. Peace has a strange weight to it. After months of tension, after the shouting, the lies, and the sirens, the silence felt heavier than the noise. Cedar Ridge was quiet again, eerily quiet. The HOA board had been restructured, the financial investigation had gone public, and Karen's name was the talk of every local gossip circle. Her son faced charges for property destruction and reckless endangerment, while she herself was awaiting indictment for embezzlement and fraud. But even as the dust settled, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't truly over. Not yet. I spent my days rebuilding the Mustang in my garage, taking it one dent, one scratch at a time. It was more than just a car, it was a reminder of everything that had been broken and rebuilt. The cracked windshield, the twisted frame, the burnt smell of rubber still clinging to the metal, all of it told a story. My story. The Mustang had survived the storm just like I had, and now it was my therapy. Every bolt I tightened, every patch I welded, it all brought me closer to closure. The neighborhood began to thaw, too. The same people who once watched me with suspicion now waved when I passed by. Kids rode their bikes without fear of being yelled at for violating HOA rules. Someone even organized a community barbecue, the first in years. They invited me, of course, though I almost didn't go. I wasn't much for crowds anymore. But Duke had a way of convincing me. One look from those big brown eyes and I found myself walking him down to the park that Saturday afternoon. The scene was something out of a postcard: laughter, music, kids running, the smell of grilled burgers filling the air. For once, Cedar Ridge looked like the peaceful suburb it had always pretended to be. I sat under a tree, Duke lying at my side, sipping sweet tea someone handed me. That's when I saw her. Karen. She was standing across the street, just beyond the park, half hidden behind a lamppost. Gone was the perfect hair, the polished smile, the pearls. She looked smaller somehow, thinner. Her clothes were plain, her eyes hollow. For a moment, she didn't seem like the tyrant who had ruled over everyone. She just looked lost. Our eyes met, and for a long second, the noise around us faded. Then she turned and walked away. I didn't follow her. Some battles aren't worth fighting twice. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, I got a call from Owens. "You sitting down?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, watching Duke chase fireflies across the yard. "What's up?" "Karen turned herself in," he said. "Confessed to everything. Even handed over documents we didn't have." For a while, neither of us spoke. I felt relieved, but not triumphant. Justice doesn't always taste sweet. Sometimes it's just quiet. "What about her son?" I asked. "Pled guilty to property damage. He's looking at probation and community service. His mom's testimony helped his case." Owens paused. She said something about wanting to end the cycle. Guess even she realized what her pride cost her. I nodded slowly. "People can change," I said. "Maybe," he replied. "But only when they've got nothing left to lose." That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked out to the garage, turned on the old radio, and ran my hand along the Mustang's hood. The metal was smooth again, newly painted, the deep midnight blue gleaming under the lights. I turned the key, the engine roared to life, low and steady, like a heartbeat returning after a long silence. Duke barked once, tail wagging, as if to say, "We made it." Driving through the empty streets felt surreal. The same roads that had once been battlegrounds of control and ego were now just quiet suburban lanes. I passed Karen's old house, empty, the lights off, the "for sale" sign leaning slightly to one side. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying faint echoes of everything that had happened. When I reached the overlook outside of town, the one with the view of Cedar Ridge's lights twinkling below, I parked, turned off the engine, and just sat there. The air was cool, crisp, and filled with that subtle stillness that comes after a storm finally ends. I thought about why I'd come here in the first place. After 20 years on the force, I'd wanted peace. I'd wanted to stop living in the chaos of other people's worst days. But the truth was, peace isn't something you find, it's something you build. Sometimes you have to fight for it. Sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what it's worth. In the weeks that followed, life moved forward. The new HOA board actually listened to residents. Rules were rewritten, fair, reasonable, and respectful. The community started to heal. And me? I stayed. People often asked if I'd ever go back to policing officially. I'd smile and tell them I never really stopped. A badge doesn't make you the law, your actions do. I still helped out when the department needed an extra hand, trained a few rookies, did some community outreach. But mostly, I lived quietly. Worked on cars. Took Duke fishing. Enjoyed mornings without alarms or sirens. And every time I'd hear that familiar Mustang growl echo through the neighborhood, people would wave. Some of them still called me Chief. I didn't correct them. Because deep down, I realized something: authority doesn't come from a title. It comes from standing up when it matters. And when Karen tried to break me, when she used lies, intimidation, and her false sense of control, all she did was remind me who I was. A protector. A builder. A man who wouldn't bend to bullies. Months later, on a quiet Sunday, I found an envelope taped to my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note on plain paper. You were right. I lost myself. I'm trying to fix that now. Thank you for not fighting back the way I deserved. K. I read it twice, folded it neatly, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. I didn't need an apology. But it meant something, proof that even the worst storms can clear the air. As I stood there, the morning sun rose over Cedar Ridge, spilling golden light across the lawns and rooftops. Duke barked softly beside me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at home. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally stopped fighting. Peace had come full circle. And as the engine of my Mustang purred to life one more time, I smiled, because sometimes justice isn't about punishment. It's about closure. And this, finally, was mine.